Duke Gerald and Marin share a quiet moment over tea. He asks how she is settling into his castle, and she responds with genuine gratitude, telling him she's living very comfortably. When he presses her, wanting to know if she truly likes it, Marin's face lights up. She declares that she loves it there. After her recent struggles, the warm bed, delicious meals, and generous pay feel like a dream come true. Her enthusiastic answer gives the Duke an idea, and a thoughtful smile crosses his face as he leans in. With a thoughtful smile, Duke Gerald leaned in and made a shocking proposition. If she loved it there so much, then she should marry him. Marin was speechless. She stammered, pretending she hadn't heard him correctly. Unfazed, the Duke bluntly repeated his proposal. Completely flustered, Marin jumped up, claiming her hearing must be failing and that she needed a doctor. His single, firm command to sit stopped her in her tracks. Defeated, she could only wonder if he was teasing her again, nervously laughing that he was being especially mischievous today. Trying to brush off his ridiculous proposal, Marin nervously attempted to change the subject back to her duties. But the Duke wasn't playing games. He cut straight through her deflection, demanding to know what she truly wanted. When she feigned confusion, he dropped a bombshell, addressing her by her full noble name, Lady Marin Schwentz. He coolly stated that she must have a reason for hiding her identity to work in his castle. Overcome with shock and fear, Marin could only hiccup as he asked if she really thought she could fool him so easily. Marin's mind raced in pure panic. She was so sure her disguise had worked perfectly, but the Duke saw right through it. Now that her secret was exposed, she was certain her life was over. The story then flashes back to a much simpler time. In a cozy, sunlit room, a younger Marin called out for her mother. The kind woman entered with a tray of food and a warm smile, gently asking her daughter if she was finally awake. A younger Marin brought food to her sick mother, gently urging her to eat. Her mother, however, always refused, claiming she had no appetite. Deeply worried, Marin feared her mother wouldn't survive the winter if she kept skipping meals. To lift her spirits, Marin offered to read her a book, something her mother always found comforting. Their tender moment was abruptly shattered by a series of loud thuds from downstairs. Telling her mother she would go check, Marin left the untouched soup, pleading for her to eat it. Downstairs, Marin was confronted by her landlord, Jono. He greeted her with a slimy smile, telling her not to be so cold. Getting straight to the point, he announced that starting this month, the rent had tripled. Marin was floored by the sudden demand, asking how it could change so unexpectedly. Jono just shrugged it off, claiming he had been giving her a special discount until now. In a panic, Marin pleaded for more time, wondering where she would ever find that much money on such short notice. With a slimy grin, Jono suggested there was another way for Marin to cover the rent. He reached out, his vile intentions becoming terrifyingly clear. Reacting instantly, Marin shoved him with all her might, sending him tumbling backward before she slammed the door shut. He furiously pounded on the wood, screaming insults and threatening to throw her and her sick mother out if she didn't have the money next time. Alone, Marin knew she couldn't let them be kicked out, especially with winter approaching. She had to find a solution. Desperate for a solution, Marin admitted she needed money badly. She weighed her options, contemplating if she should finally use the secret knowledge she possessed. This secret was something that only she, in the entire empire, could know. After a terrible carriage accident left her hovering between life and death, she woke up with a startling revelation. She was living inside the world of a novel she had once read. The story was called The Bluebird of the Western Duke Does Not Cry, and its male lead was very, very real. She recalled the novel's plot clearly. The male lead, the powerful Western Duke, was blinded during a vicious demon attack. He was eventually healed by a brilliant herbologist, the story's female lead, and the two fell in love. In this grand romance, Marin was a complete nobody, an extra who didn't even get a mention. Her original plan was to simply live a quiet life. But her family's tragic past changed everything. House Schwentz was once wealthy, but a carriage accident that claimed her father and brother left them in ruins. The accident also unearthed a massive debt her father had left behind. Before Marin even had a moment to process her reincarnation, her entire world collapsed. Poverty hit them fast and hard. They were forced to sell everything they owned until almost nothing remained. Her noble title as a viscount's daughter was now completely useless. She had tried to survive by ignoring her knowledge of the novel, but she had reached her limit. With new resolve, Maren decided it was time to use the weapons she possessed, her unique ability and the secrets only she knew. Maren found herself at an impossibly grand mansion, her hands twisting in her lap from nerves. A man's voice called her name, making her jump. He held a document she had written, and with a small smile, he complimented her neat handwriting. Maren managed a flustered thank you, a wave of relief washing over her. It was in that moment the surreal reality of her situation crashed down. This was no longer just a story she remembered. She was truly living inside the novel, about to meet its characters in person. The Duke's aide noted that it was unusual for a noble lady to read and write. Maren's heart pounded. She was speaking to a major character from the novel, and the pressure was immense. When he asked where she learned, Maren quickly spun a tale about a kind young master at a count's household who taught her. She added that she still reads her few books often, as new ones are a luxury she can't afford. Internally, she worried her story might seem suspicious, since noble women were typically taught arts and music, not literacy. Maren recalled her true past. Her love for reading was so strong that she had begged her father to teach her how. While other noble ladies focused on social events, Maren found joy and comfort within the pages of books. Back in the present, the Duke's aide, Olive Leon, finally spoke. He informed her that he was indeed looking for an assistant, but he was expecting a boy named Marion, not a lady. Maren's expression fell. She knew this unconventional approach was her only chance to even set foot inside the Duke's home. Maren considered disguising herself, but knew the Duke would see right through it. She had to take this chance as herself. Thinking quickly, she explained that Marion was her brother who had left for the capital, and she didn't want to miss this great opportunity. Olive Leon was unmoved, stating the household had enough female staff, and hiring them wasn't his call anyway. As he tried to end the interview, Maren interrupted, insisting it was necessary. Olive asked if she meant for her own sake, but his expression shifted when he realized she meant it was necessary for the Duke. Olive asked what she meant. Maren calmly explained that the Duke's unfortunate accident was common knowledge in the Western region. The aide's expression hardened. He questioned if she truly understood the weight of her words and demanded she leave at once. Refusing to be dismissed, Maren's mind raced. An idea sparked. She suddenly lunged for a book on a nearby table. Olive yelled in protest, asking what she was doing, but Maren just smiled confidently, a faint golden light beginning to surround her as she prepared to demonstrate her unique ability. With a faint golden light shimmering around her, Maren began flawlessly reciting the book's contents. She detailed a complex theory about monster ecology, quoting obscure scholarly debates with perfect accuracy. Olive Leon watched, completely stunned by her incredible recall. Pausing her demonstration, Maren calmly asked if she should continue. She then explained that when the Duke couldn't read documents himself, she could serve as his eyes, reading anything aloud just like this. The aide was left utterly speechless, finally understanding the unique and essential value she offered the household. Maren internally celebrated, certain her unique recall and past life skills would make her the perfect aide for a blind Duke. Believing she could be a genuine help to him, her confidence soared. Now convinced of her value, Olive Leon calmly invited her to sit down. Just as Maren's hopes were rising, the aide explained that he unfortunately lacked the authority to hire her for such a critical role. Only the Duke himself could make that decision. Maren's heart sank as worries about rent and medicine flooded her mind. Olive Leon complimented Maren's reading, admitting he'd never seen such a special ability. He confessed that reading documents for the Duke had been a persistent problem for the household. With a slight smile, he declared that Maren could be the solution they've been looking for. Hope sparked in Maren's eyes as she asked if he truly meant it. Olive confirmed and suggested they go see the Duke right away. He led her down a long, dark corridor, and Maren quickly realized she could barely see where she was going. As they proceeded, Maren found the mansion's interior as dark as a pitch-black cave. Holding a single candle, Olive explained that the Duke is highly sensitive to light. He promised to teach her the various precautions she'd need to take if she were to serve him, and Maren hesitantly agreed. They finally stopped before a massive set of doors. Olive knocked firmly. A moment later, a deep voice from within gave the command to enter. As the heavy door creaked open, Maren caught her first glimpse of Duke Gerald, blindfolded and seated at his desk. As Marin entered the dimly lit office, a powerful realization hit her. The imposing man seated at the desk was no stranger to her. He was the male protagonist from the novel she knew so well. The bluebird of the Western Duke does not cry. She stared, her mind reeling as she finally came face to face with the infamous Duke Gerald. With his sharp features hidden behind a blindfold, his stern presence filled the quiet room, proving he was just as intimidating as the stories had described. Duke Gerald demanded to know what they wanted. Olive explained he planned to hire a person but needed the Duke's permission. The Duke scoffed, questioning why he would need to approve every new servant. Olive insisted this case was special, suggesting it would be good to keep Marin by Gerald's side. Believing she was another doctor, Gerald dismissed the idea, claiming he'd met them all. Marin tensed as Olive clarified that while she wasn't a doctor, she would be very helpful. He then asked Marin to do what she did in the reception room. Stealing her nerves, Marin accepted the document from Olive. She knew this was her chance to prove her worth. Focusing intently, she unleashed her special ability. Information from the report flooded her senses, an urgent plea to close a failing silver mine in the Nylon territory. The mine was a bust, yielding only worthless rock and housing dangerous monsters. As she mentally recited the contents, Duke Gerald flinched, sensing an odd shift in the air. Marin looked up, a bright, confident smile on her face. Task complete. As Marin processed the information, a sudden realization hit her. This wasn't just a random failing mine. It was a major plot point from the original novel she knew. In that story, the female lead discovers the mine isn't for silver at all. She finds a unique mineral, opal, and turns it into a stunning necklace. The gem becomes a massive sensation in high society, causing its value to skyrocket. Marin quickly understood the incredible opportunity before her. If she could secretly get her hands on a few of those opals, she would make a fortune. Lost in her profitable daydreams, Marin quietly remarked what a waste it was. Suddenly, a deep voice asked what she meant. She jumped, startled to find Duke Gerald standing right beside her. He leaned in closer, his presence overwhelming as he calmly repeated his question. Panicked by his sudden appearance and intense questioning, Marin stumbled backward. Losing her balance completely, she cried out as she began to fall, the crucial report slipping from her hands and fluttering through the air. Just as Marin was about to hit the floor, a firm hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. With a swift, strong pull, Duke Gerald yanked her upright, bringing her right into his arms. Stunned by the sudden closeness, Marin could only manage a stammered thank you. For a second, she found herself completely sidetracked by how good-looking he was up close. But she quickly shook herself out of it, realizing this was not the time to be admiring his face. He was still holding her, silently waiting for an answer about the mine. Trapped in his arms, Marin blurts out the first thing she can think of: monsters. Thinking fast, she explains that tunnel monsters are attracted to shiny minerals. Their presence, she suggests, could mean there are valuable gems in the mine, not just silver. Ignoring her clever excuse, the Duke cuts straight to the point and demands her name. She timidly introduces herself as Marin and confirms she's a commoner. He keeps his grip on her wrist, remarking how surprising it is for a commoner to analyze a report. The Duke smirks, calling Marin a genius for her quick thinking. She is completely stunned, trying to deny the unexpected praise. After a brief pause, he releases her and makes a decision. He instructs his aide, Olive, to draw up a temporary employment contract immediately. Marin is overjoyed, her face lighting up as she thanks him for the job. But the Duke adds one more strange order. Olive is to feed her. His reasoning? Her wrist is as thin as a twig. Marin is left flustered by the bizarre yet oddly considerate comment. Flustered, Marin thinks to herself that it isn't her wrist that's thin, but his hands that are unusually large. After she leaves, the Duke sighs, alone in his study. He reflects on the strange woman, noting her voice wasn't irritating. For the first time in a long while, a report actually captured his full attention. He now understands why Olive recommended her so strongly. The narrative reveals a secret of his ducal family, a hereditary power of incredibly sharp vision, passed down only to the eldest son. The power of the ducal family wasn't just limited to sight. For the current Duke, Gerald von Baines, all his senses were superhuman. He could hear whispers from 50 meters away and feel the slightest change in the air, making him the strongest protector in his family's history. But a year ago, a monster attack changed everything, taking his vision. To compensate, his other senses became overwhelmingly powerful. This sensory overload was torture, with the quietest sounds striking his head like thunder. This explains why Marin's voice was so different. It didn't hurt him. Alone in his study, Gerald reflects on his meeting with Marin. He realizes her presence hadn't been painful for him, a rare moment of peace. But his superhuman hearing had also picked up on her racing heart. He knew she was lying, and he knew she was terrified of him. Why would she lie under such pressure? A hooded figure silently appears in the room. Now consumed by curiosity about the strange woman who soothes his pain yet lies to his face, Gerald gives a firm command: investigate her. Marin's eyes go wide when she sees the contract. The job offered a weekly wage of 1 gold, which was enough to cover an entire month of living expenses. It was a dream come true. The Duke's aide explains that this is a highly paid specialty role, even for a contract worker. Marin remembers the novel, recalling the Duke's other specialists: spies, a blacksmith, and an alchemist. Dazzled by the money, she asks if her salary would increase with a permanent position. The aide's enthusiastic yes is all she needs to hear, and she immediately asks where to sign. Without a second thought, Marin signs a contract, confidently telling the aide there's no need to check it. She trusts the ducal house completely. The aide then surprises her with a gift, a book he heard she would like. Marin's eyes widen in disbelief. It's the exact book on magic that helped her pass the interview. He nonchalantly says he was just going to discard it anyway. Thrilled, she happily accepts the book, clutching it tightly. To her, this isn't just a discarded item, it's her lucky charm. Marin arrives home late at night, calling out to her mother. From her bed, her mother welcomes her warmly and asks if she had a tough day at work. Marin insists it wasn't hard at all, but her smile falters when she spots an untouched meal by the bedside. Her mother skipped dinner again. Shifting gears, Marin proudly presents a large basket, unveiling a feast of fresh bread, pastries, and fruit. Her mother is stunned by the sight. Her initial shock quickly turns to worry, and she asks if Marin had to borrow money again. Marin quickly eases her mother's fears, explaining the food wasn't from a loan. She excitedly reveals that she secured a job at the renowned ducal house vines. The news washes away her mother's worry, replacing it with pure, tearful joy. Clasping her hands, she thanks God for this incredible opportunity. Marin is touched, realizing it's been ages since her mother looked so happy. But her own smile fades as she confesses a crucial detail. She lied to the Duke, telling him she was a commoner. Her mother's happiness evaporates, and she demands to know why. Marin explains that she had to lie about her status. As a noble, she never would have been hired. The Duke has been hounded by countless young ladies with ulterior motives, making him distrustful of everyone. From her knowledge of the novel, Marin knows he's supposed to be a recluse until the true female lead appears. She reassures her mother, promising to quit as soon as she's saved enough money. Her mother smiles, putting her full trust in her. Marin is determined to avoid the story's main plot and simply live peacefully with her mother. Marin feels confident in her plan. She doesn't need a permanent position. She just has to endure for 6 months, save her money, and get out. But her simple strategy is immediately derailed when a staff member tells her to go home for the day. Confused, Marin asks about the next day and the next, only to be told to stay away. The horrifying thought dawns on her. Was she fired after just 1 day? In a panic, she grabs the attendant, declaring she'd rather die than leave. The startled man quickly tries to clarify the huge misunderstanding. Just as Marin is making a scene, a cold voice cuts through the chaos, ordering both her and the attendant inside. Mortified, Marin realizes the Duke was present for her entire outburst. They are led into a dimly lit room where Duke Gerald stands by his desk, an imposing figure even with his eyes covered. As Marin stands there, frozen with embarrassment, her senses pick up something unsettling. A faint, metallic smell hangs in the air, a scent she recognizes immediately as blood, leaving her completely stunned. The metallic scent triggers a traumatic memory for Marin, flashing back to a chaotic carriage accident from her past. She desperately tells herself not to faint, struggling to stay composed. The Duke's cold voice breaks her daze, questioning why she's so desperate to die by repeating her earlier outburst. As a mortified Marin tries to stammer out a denial, the attendant, Ubis, quickly intervenes. He apologizes to the Duke, explaining that he tried to send her home due to his Grace's condition, but Marin had simply misunderstood it as her dismissal. Duke Gerald now understands the reason for Marin's fuss. A mortified Marin quickly apologizes, explaining she had no idea about his condition. The attendant, Ubis, expresses concern, revealing that the Duke is injured and hasn't been treated yet. It finally clicks for Marin. The smell of blood she noticed earlier was coming from him. Gerald coldly dismisses the worry and demands the report. Ubis hands the documents to Marin, who nervously prepares to begin her recitation, feeling completely out of her depth. Standing awkwardly in the large room, Marin admits to herself that being near the Duke is unnerving. Hoping to keep some space between them, she asks if she can read the report from a distance. Duke Gerald doesn't even bother to reply. Instead, he strides across the room in an instant, grabbing her arm and pulling her directly in front of him. He flatly rejects her request, commanding her to come closer. Caught completely off guard, Marin can only stare up at him, speechless at his sudden and assertive move. Without warning, Duke Gerald yanks Marin closer, pulling her back firmly against his chest. He rejects her silent plea for space with a simple command to come closer still. The sudden, intimate contact makes Marin let out an involuntary squeak. Instantly horrified, she slaps a hand over her mouth, panicking about making a loud noise. Caught completely off guard by his bold move and flustered by her own reaction, she freezes on the spot, unable to think or move. His proximity is overwhelming, leaving her utterly speechless. Duke Gerald breaks the tense silence, questioning Marin's muffled reaction. He asks directly if she held back her voice on purpose. Completely flustered, Marin explains that she didn't want to bother him with a loud noise. The Duke points out that getting startled is a natural reaction. Thinking fast, Marin gives her real reason. She worried that his impaired vision might make him more sensitive to sudden sounds. She was simply trying to be considerate and quietly apologizes for the misunderstanding, clutching the report tightly. Duke Gerald remains quiet, processing her words. He finds it impossible that a temporary worker could know his family's secret, yet her quick analysis is undeniably impressive. Finally, he thanks her. Marin visibly relaxes, happy that he accepted her excuse. Just then, bright sunlight streams through the curtains, making her shield her eyes. As the light hits the Duke, she notices a small, dark red drop on his ear. Her relief vanishes instantly as she realizes with a jolt that it's blood, and something is terribly wrong. Panicked, Marin points out that Duke Gerald's ear is bleeding. He brushes off her concern, calling it nothing. But Marin insists he should get it treated, worried about how severe the injury must be. The Duke simply reveals a stained handkerchief, calmly stating the wound will heal in a day and that he already knows the cause. Internally, Marin is frustrated by his casual disregard for his own well-being. She thinks his stubbornness is remarkably similar to someone else she knows, finding the resemblance uncanny. With a look of dawning horror, Marin asks if he knows about the injury. Duke Gerald stands with his back to her and calmly confesses that he did it to himself. Marin is stunned, immediately demanding to know who had hurt him, but the Duke simply repeats his shocking statement. "I did." The revelation silences her. She realizes he must have been so overwhelmed by some unbearable sound that he took desperate measures. The thought of how much pain he must have endured to do that to himself leaves her completely shaken. Marin is struck by a profound realization. She had judged him completely wrong. He wasn't just a character from a novel, he was a real person capable of being hurt. A wave of shame hits her as she considers how she dismissed his suffering as mere plot information. She imagines the terror he must have felt when he suddenly lost to sight. The Duke, sensing her distress, quietly asks why she's reacting this way. With tears in her eyes, Marin is startled when he turns and begins to ask why she is crying. The intense moment is broken when an advisor enters, addressing both the Duke and Marin. He explains that he's brought more reports requiring their attention and hands the documents to Marin. Realizing she needs to set her feelings aside, Marin agrees, deciding it's best to focus on her work first. As she begins to review the papers, she can feel Duke Gerald's presence nearby. He stands silently, his attention fixed entirely on her as she works, letting the earlier emotional conversation hang unresolved in the air. After reviewing the final report, Marin attempts a professional exit, wishing the Duke a good rest. But as she turns to leave, Gerald suddenly grabs her wrist, stopping her. He bluntly comments that her wrist still looks as thin as a twig. Annoyed by his recurring fixation, Maren is left speechless. The Duke then gives her a bizarre order. She must gain weight and then come directly to him for a personal inspection. Completely stunned by his strange demand, a flustered Maren can only stammer out a confused agreement. Maren rushes out, completely bewildered by the Duke's bizarre order to have her weight inspected by him personally. After the door closes, Duke Gerald stands alone, reflecting on how strange she is. He realizes that while Maren seems afraid of him, she also cried with genuine concern over his injuries, a reaction he's never received from anyone. His private investigation had already uncovered her tragic past, Lady Maren Schwentz, a noble whose family fell into ruin. She now lives in poverty, supporting her sick mother with no dowry or prospects. Left alone in his office, Duke Gerald continues to ponder Maren's motives. His investigation revealed nothing special about her background, which only makes him question why she would approach him in the first place. He admits to himself that he can't predict her next move. While an unpredictable person is usually a dangerous variable, a small smile forms on his face. He concludes that Maren isn't just dangerous, she's also very interesting. His fascination with the perplexing woman is clearly growing deeper with each strange encounter. The aide leads Maren into a grand and spacious office, leaving her momentarily speechless. He explains that she'll be assisting him with his work here, in addition to her duties with the Duke, before showing her to a beautiful new desk. For a moment, Maren feels a thrill at the thought of using such nice furniture after so long. But her concern for Duke Gerald quickly returns. She asks the aide if it's really okay to leave the Duke's wound unattended. The aide's expression grows somber as he confesses he's worried about that. 2. The aide reveals a bigger problem. The Duke despises being touched, so he refuses all treatment. On top of that, he suffers from insomnia, which is slowing his recovery. Maren is stunned, as this detail was never in the novel. She briefly thinks about using her secret healing ability, but stops herself, deciding it's not her place to interfere with the story's plot. Instead, she offers a simple, practical solution her mother used to use: warm wine to help him sleep. The aide considers her surprisingly straightforward suggestion with intrigue. Feeling more comfortable in her new role, Maren tells the aide, Olive, that he can drop the formalities with her. He points out that she's already being friendly and asks her to simply call him by his name. After they agree, Olive cheerfully presents a towering stack of paperwork, eager to get started. Maren's enthusiastic expression immediately drops. Staring at the mountain of documents, she realizes this job is going to be far more challenging than she first thought, and quietly wonders if she celebrated finding a good boss a little too soon. Staring at the mountain of paperwork, Maren feels completely doomed. Just then, Olive interrupts her work, presenting a plate of exquisite desserts. He explains that she must be peckish and reveals a strange order from the Duke. She is to be fattened up. Flustered by the command, Maren reluctantly takes a bite, worried she might get sick. But to her surprise, the cake is absolutely delicious. The taste reminds her so much of her mother that she shyly asks Olive if she can save some for later. Maren shyly apologizes for asking to save some of the cake. Olive smiles warmly and agrees to let the kitchen know. Their conversation is cut short by a knock on the door. Olive immediately recognizes the visitor and announces the arrival of the head butler, Sebastian. As the composed older man enters, Olive greets him politely. He asks the butler if he had a good time at his grandson's wedding, making some friendly small talk. Maren quietly observes the interaction, getting a better sense of the mansion's staff. As their conversation continues, Maren learns a surprising fact about the head butler. Seabass isn't just a servant. He's the former vice commander of the Night Order and one of the Duke's most ardent followers. The esteemed butler asks Olive if it's possible to thank the Duke in person. However, Olive apologetically informs him that it would be difficult today. Maren watches in surprise, realizing that even the head butler must go through Olive to see the Duke. After the exchange, Olive formally introduces Maren as his new assistant, and she greets Seabass politely. Olive formally introduces Maren to the head butler, explaining she's a special employee who reports directly to the Duke. He adds that Maren's reporting skills are so exceptional that even Duke Gerald was satisfied. The head butler is stunned, asking if the Duke was truly pleased. After Olive confirms it, Seabass is overcome with emotion. He walks directly to Marin and takes her hands, declaring she must be truly amazing to earn His Grace's approval. He passionately pledges his full support, leaving Marin slightly overwhelmed as she thanks him for the intense praise. Feeling the weight of the head butler's passionate support, Marin grows nervous. She knows she has to be careful, or her little white lie will be exposed. The thought of how the Duke's fiercely loyal followers might react is genuinely frightening. Later that night, the mansion is quiet, but Duke Gerald is still awake in his study. Olive enters, expressing concern that his master hasn't slept in days. He urges him to rest, but the Duke's attention is captured by the drink on the tray. He calmly identifies the scent as wine. The Duke scoffs, doubting the wine will actually help him sleep. Olive explains that he brought it on Miss Marin's recommendation, relaying her personal advice that her mother would drink wine to help her rest. Intrigued, Gerald asks where his temporary aide is, only to learn she is already left for the day. Seizing the moment, Olive shares his observations. He points out Marin's literacy, her casual mention of wine, and the refined way she holds a teacup. Putting it all together, Olive states his firm belief: Marin is no commoner. Olive reveals his discovery. Marin is the daughter of a ruined baron. He pities her, guessing that desperation for money must have driven her to use a fake resume. Duke Gerald mulls this over, considering the woman who so easily gains favor with everyone around him. His thoughts take a sharp turn, wondering if she actually possesses the qualities of a spy. Despite this sudden suspicion, he calmly takes a sip of wine, remarking that after so long, it's not bad at all. Marin walked home, pleased with the full basket she carried. She was glad she had spoken to Olive earlier. Her thoughts turned to her mother, and she smiled, relieved that her mom's appetite was finally returning. This was the perfect time to give her nutritious meals, but to do that, she knew she needed to earn more money. Her hopeful mood shattered when she arrived home. The front door was wide open. A cold dread filled her as she stared in disbelief, the basket slipping from her grasp and falling to the ground. Marin's heart hammered against her ribs as she stepped inside, calling out for her mother. The small home was in complete disarray, with furniture toppled over and their few possessions scattered across the floor. Overwhelmed by the chaotic scene, she wondered what could have happened. A faint voice called her name from the bedroom, and she rushed toward the sound. Throwing the door open, Marin found her mother slumped over the vanity table, looking weak and distressed. Frozen in shock, Marin's mind raced, desperately questioning who could have done such a thing to them. Marin's mother weakly explained that the landlord's wife had visited. The woman mistakenly believed Marin was seeing her husband and, in a fit of rage, had ransacked their home. To make matters worse, she demanded they pay the rent by the next day or be thrown out. Rihanna apologized, heartbroken that she could only manage to protect the vanity table. Marin hugged her mother, insisting it wasn't her fault. Internally, however, she blamed herself, regretting that she hadn't put a stop to the landlord's unwanted attention sooner. With her family on the brink, Marin makes a difficult decision. She tells her mother that she is going to the Duke's castle, convinced it's their only remaining hope. Later that night, she stands alone before the massive, intimidating estate, calling out into the darkness. Two men soon approach, demanding to know who she is. Unfazed, Marin introduces herself as an employee working under aide Olive. She firmly states that she must see the Duke on an urgent matter and requests to be led inside immediately. The guard eyed Marin suspiciously. He questioned her claim of working for aide Olive, pointing out that he had never seen her before. Turning to his red-haired companion, Yuvis, he asked if he recognized the woman. Yuvis bluntly stated he had no idea who she was. Before the guard could react, Yuvis ignored his shouts and dashed away toward the mansion. The remaining guard, flustered, apologized for his colleague's immature behavior. He told Marin to wait right there while he went to confirm her story with the aide himself. After her story is confirmed, Marin is led into a lavish waiting room. The head butler, Seabass, approaches and confirms that she is here to see aide Olive. Marin breathes a quiet sigh of relief. Just then, Olive himself enters the room, his expression full of concern. He asks what could be so urgent to bring her here at this hour. Standing up, Marin swallows her pride and bows her head. She admits she has only worked for a single day, but desperately asks if she could possibly receive an advance on her weekly pay. Marin laid out her desperate circumstances for the aide. Her landlord was going to throw her and her sick mother out the very next day. While she could live in a shed, she couldn't subject her ailing mother to that. Flustered, Olive told her to lift her head, explaining that only the Duke could approve her compensation. With no other choice, he decided they must go to him directly. He led Marin to a grand set of doors and announced they had a report. From inside, a voice commanded them to enter. As they were about to enter, Olive stopped Marin. He handed her the candlestick, explaining that the Duke had only requested her presence. Confused and nervous, Marin stepped into the vast, candlelit room alone. Duke Gerald sat behind his desk, his eyes covered by a simple blindfold. He cut straight to the point, asking what it was that she wanted. Gathering her courage, Marin bowed her head and made her desperate plea for an advance on her weekly salary. The Duke said nothing, leaving her to wait in a heavy, uncertain silence. The Duke considered her desperate plea, then asked why he should grant her an advance. More importantly, he wanted to know what she could possibly offer him in return. Marin's mind raced. She was penniless and had nothing of value to give a man of his stature. Her eyes then fell on a wine bottle on his desk, and an idea formed. Recalling rumors of his poor recovery and lack of sleep, she made an unusual offer. She could help him sleep. The Duke was baffled. Marin quickly clarified that she was good at reading books aloud, a skill that always helped her mother rest peacefully. The Duke's tone was sharp as he demanded to know how she learned of his insomnia, correctly guessing Olive was her source. Marin nervously confirmed it, rushing to add that Olive meant no harm. Before she could finish her defense, the Duke simply said, "Fine." Stunned by his abrupt agreement, Marin barely had time to process what was happening. He then rose from his desk, his voice low as he gave the unexpected command, "Let's sleep." Marin stood frozen in place, her face flushing as his words hung in the air. Marin's face went completely red. She knew he didn't mean anything improper, but his choice of words was incredibly strange. Before she could sort out her flustered thoughts, the Duke asked a practical question about her travel time from the castle. Marin answered that it took about an hour. Deciding this was unacceptable, the Duke immediately summoned Olive. He then gave the order to move Marin into the mansion's annex the next morning, adding that arrangements should also be made for her family to live with her. Olive confirmed the Duke's orders, promising an advance payment right away. Marin was stunned. She had only asked for a small advance, but now her housing and financial troubles were completely solved. She could even bring her mother to live in the ducal castle. Overcome with relief, she sincerely thanked the Duke. Once she was gone, however, the Duke sat alone in his office. He wondered if Marin thought he was just making her play nanny by having her read him to sleep, unable to guess what was going through her mind. Duke Gerald concluded that with Marin moving into the castle, he would understand her soon enough. Later that night, Marin returned to her small family home. As she gently patted the horse lent to her by the estate, her mother, Rihanna, came out to greet her. Rihanna was worried about her daughter returning so late. After explaining the situation, Marin looked at her mom with determination. She announced that their lives were about to change completely because they were moving. Rihanna panicked at the thought of moving, wondering where they could possibly go. Marin gently took her mother's hands and calmed her fears. She joyfully announced that Duke Gerald had given them a home in the servants' annex at the castle. Not only that, but he was also sending a carriage for them tomorrow. Her mother was speechless, her worry melting into pure joy. Seeing a bright smile on her mother's face for the first time in ages, Marin felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Their struggles were finally over. The next morning, Marin's landlords were in a heated argument. The woman berated her husband, Jono, for not collecting the rent. Jono sighed, reminding her of the Schwentz family's difficult situation. But his wife wasn't concerned with money. She angrily declared her desire to harm Marin personally. Jono tried to be practical, pointing out that they needed the tenants for their rundown property. This only enraged her more. She struck him, screaming that this was all his fault, accusing him of having an affair with their young tenant. Jono's wife grabbed him by the collar, her voice sharp with accusation. He insisted it was all a misunderstanding, but she accused him of defending Marin. Just then, Jono spotted Marin standing outside, calmly waiting for them. The wife's anger immediately shifted to a greedy sneer, convinced the girls were trying to skip out on their rent. The landlords walked over to confront Marin. With an air of superiority, the wife demanded to know if the money was ready. Marin met her gaze without a word, completely unfazed by the woman's attitude. With a thud, Marin dropped a heavy pouch of coins on the ground. The landlady's eyes widened, demanding to know where Marin found so much money. Her husband, Jono, grimly suggested there was only one way a young woman could earn that kind of sum overnight. A nasty smile grew on his wife's face as she understood the implication. In a flash, Marin's calm broke. A sharp sound cut the air as she struck the woman across the face. The landlady stumbled back, screaming at Marin, who stood trembling with fury at the vile accusation. Marin's fury didn't stop with the wife. She turned and delivered a sharp blow to the landlord, Jono, stunning them both. Trying to deflect, Jono blurted out that he knew all about an affair, accidentally revealing the name Windai. The landlady's focus immediately shifted from Marin to her husband. Screaming that Windai was the one who told her about Marin in the first place, her suspicion turned to pure rage. The wife grabbed her panicking husband, shouting that if he admired other women so much, they should just end things right there. As the landlord's fury peaked, he screamed that this whole mess was Marin's fault and reached out to grab her. Suddenly, a gloved hand caught his wrist midair, stopping him cold. To Marin's surprise, it was Butler Seabass from the Duke's mansion. The butler calmly noted that this was clearly more than a simple argument. With effortless authority, he pushed the landlord down. Ignoring the stunned couple, Seabass turned to Marin with a bow, stating he had come to escort her. Behind him stood a magnificent carriage, waiting to leave. Marin was surprised the Duke sent Butler Seabass in person, especially this early in the morning. The carriage he brought was stunningly grand, far more than she ever expected. As she took it all in, Seabass overheard her comment about the time. He gave a knowing smile, remarking that it seemed he had arrived at just the right moment. His calm authority was undeniable, leaving the landlord and his wife completely silenced. Standing beside the composed butler, Marin was left utterly speechless by the turn of events. The landlord's wife smirked, assuming Marin had found a rich old man to solve her problems. But Butler Seabass paid her no mind. He calmly informed the couple that the very land they stood on belonged to Duke Vines. His sharp gaze fell on the landlord as he asked if he had permission to build a cabin and charge rent. The man stammered that the Duke allowed a rest stop for hunters. Seabass corrected him immediately. The Duke permitted a free resting place, not a rental business. As the reality of their situation sank in, the wife angrily demanded to know who he was. The landlord's wife scoffed, accusing him of just using the Duke's name to threaten them. But Butler Seabass calmly introduced himself as a butler of House Vines. At his signal, several men appeared, surrounding the shocked couple. He ordered them taken away, and their arrogance instantly crumbled into fear. The wife fell to her knees, desperately pleading for Marin to help them. Marin, however, was unmoved. She coldly stated they deserved to be punished for their actions. Intrigued by her firm stance, Seabass quietly asked when she knew they were breaking the rules. Marin explained that she knew the landlords were breaking the rules from the very beginning. Butler Seabass, confused, asked why she kept paying them. She admitted that with rent so cheap, she had hoped to avoid reporting them. However, her expression turned cold and resolute. The final straw, she declared, was them involving her mother, an offense she could not forgive. With the unpleasant couple dealt with, the mood shifted. In a peaceful garden, Marin formally introduced the butler to the elegant woman beside her, her mother, Rona. Butler Seabass formally introduced himself to Rona. He was privately intrigued by Marin, noting her polite manners hid something more complex. While the Duke clearly couldn't see through her lies, he still wanted her close, a fact Seabass decided to watch carefully. After ensuring her mother was settled in the carriage, Marin announced she would follow on a borrowed horse. With one last look back, she firmly resolved to never return to this place. She turned and walked away, leaving the painful memories of her past behind her for good. A young attendant, Ubis, welcomed Marin into a lavish, sun-drenched room. Both Marin and her mother were stunned by the luxurious space, whispering to each other in disbelief. This couldn't possibly be for the staff. Ubis smiled, explaining that the entire third floor of the annex was reserved just for them. He offered them their choice of rooms, but Marin quickly spoke up. She declared that her mother would take this beautiful room, and she would stay in the one right next door. Ubis happily agreed to her thoughtful arrangement. A young maid with bright red hair entered, pushing a cart filled with tea and treats. She shyly introduced herself as Yuria and announced she would be serving them from now on. Marin was stunned by this level of care, wondering why they needed a personal attendant. Yubi's explained it was arranged so Marin could focus on her duties. Brushing it off, Marin warmly introduced herself and her mother, telling Yuria to drop the formal Mississippi. The kind gesture flustered the young maid, who then got even more flustered after accidentally using the honorific anyway. Finding the young maid endearing, Marin tells Yuria to call her whatever feels comfortable. After Yubi's gives them final instructions, the two staff members leave Marin and her mother to enjoy an extravagant spread of desserts. The peaceful moment is short-lived, however. A look of dread suddenly crosses her mother's face. She confesses to Marin that the Duke's kindness made her forget his fearsome reputation and the lie they told to get here. A chilling thought hangs in the air. What will happen if he ever finds out the truth? Marin's expression sobers. Her mother is right. She remembers the terrible fate that befell others who were discovered, knowing this kindness will vanish the second she becomes useless. Putting on a brave face, she tells her mother not to worry. Marin vows to do her best to be as helpful as possible to the Duke. Elsewhere, Butler Seabass delivers a report to Yubi's, who looks utterly shocked. He asks if the temporary maid really struck someone. As he listens to the details of the incident, Duke Gerald touches his chin and smirks, amused by the chaos. Peeking from the doorway, Butler Seabass is stunned. He can't believe his eyes. The Duke actually smiled. Back at his desk, Duke Gerald delivers his judgment with cold efficiency. He instructs Olive to confiscate the assets of the guilty parties and sentence them to 5 years of hard labor. For the maid who harmed Marin's mother, the order is even more chilling. Make sure she can never use her hands again. Once he is alone, the Duke's composed mask falls. He leans back, overwhelmed by a sensory assault, his head pounding from the constant noise. The Duke is tormented, overwhelmed by a sensory assault. He stifles his pained cries, unable to remember the last time he truly slept. Lost in his dark thoughts, he questions if it's even worth enduring this constant agony. Suddenly, a warm, golden vision of Marin appears in his mind, promising to put him to sleep. Snapping back to reality, Gerald wonders if she can truly accomplish what no one else has. Clutching his head, he challenges her to do it quickly, before he completely loses his mind from the strain. Marin steps into the ducal library and is immediately captivated. The sheer scale of the collection leaves her breathless. For a moment, she's lost in the simple joy of being surrounded by books again. Then, she remembers her mission. With the promise of a 1 gold coin reward fueling her, Marin's eyes burn with determination. She vows to put the Duke to sleep, no matter what. Her plan is simple. Find the most boring book possible. She scans the shelves, considering a dense philosophy book or a dry history text to ensure success. While searching for a suitably boring book, Marin pulls out a dusty herbology text. A forgotten detail from the original novel suddenly clicks into place. The heroine cured the Duke's blindness with a remedy from a rare herb called manhwarecap. The book, however, never described it. Intrigued, Marin sits down to investigate. She murmurs the name, manhwarecap, while scanning the pages. Startled by another unexpected visitor in the library, Marin demands to know who is there. She looks over and sees a small, white-haired child holding a book, who asks for her name in return. Marin thinks the child is incredibly cute before introducing herself. The child recognizes her name, saying Olive had mentioned her, and then introduces themselves as Giorno. Marin is stunned. This couldn't be the Giorno from the novel, the cold, dignified genius alchemist who was the same age as the Duke. The reality was a small child, not the imposing figure she imagined. Marin is completely taken aback by the child's adorable, angelic face. She quickly connects the dots. The genius alchemist must have taken one of his own de-aging potions. Trying to be formal, Marin extends her hand for a handshake. But instead of a simple shake, Giorno smoothly lifts her hand and places a gentle kiss on it. Totally flustered by his surprisingly mature gesture, Marin blurts out that he's a very unusual person. His formal actions don't match his childlike appearance at all, leaving her completely baffled by the little genius. Giorno points out that Marin is so formal she even uses honorifics with the child. Attempting to hide her noble background, Marin explains that as a commoner, it's only natural for her to speak politely. With a bright, knowing smile, Giorno declares she's a terrible liar. Flustered, Marin insists she's telling the truth, but Giorno decides to drop it. Hopping into a chair, he asks why she's looking for manhwa, dismissing it as a common weed. Marin explains that it grows everywhere and clarifies it isn't a herb, which is why it's not in the book. A realization dawns on Marin, and she asks Giorno if he's the author of the book. With a proud smile, he confirms it, showing her his signature. Marin is floored, calling him incredible, and the little genius smugly agrees. For a brief moment, she finds his childish pride adorable before mentally shaking herself and remembering he's an adult. Getting back on track, she asks him about the manhwa plant. Giorno places his hand on another large book, flipping through its pages to find the information she needs. Giorno points Marin to an entry in the book, revealing an illustration of the manhwa. To Marin, it looks just like a dandelion. She asks if the plant has any medicinal properties. Giorno explains that other than a refreshing, mint-like scent, it has no particular effects. Just as Marin processes this, Giorno corrects himself with a startling clarification. Manhwa isn't a medicinal herb, it's a poisonous plant. He elaborates that its toxins are mild, only enough to cause a stomach ache, which is why it's listed in his book on poisons. Marin is stunned to learn the plant is actually a poison. Noticing her troubled expression, the boy Giorno brought along asks if she's alright. Marin quickly insists she's fine, but her mind is clearly elsewhere. Later, she descends the mansion's grand staircase, clutching the book of poisons to her chest. The weight of this new information is obvious as she walks, completely lost in thought. Her simple plan to find a medicinal herb for the Duke has just hit a major snag, leaving her to wonder what she should do next. Marin recalls a key detail from the original novel. The heroine used manhwa juice to cure the Duke's eyes. Her own plan had been much simpler, just to ease his pain until the true female lead arrived. Now, the word poison echoes in her mind. She understands giving the Duke a toxic substance is a far more serious matter than a simple lie. The original heroine's ability to turn a poison into a cure seems incredible. Clasping the book tightly, Marin renews her vow not to interfere with the main story. Marin stops abruptly in the grand, shadowy hallway, a new thought taking hold. A sudden pang of guilt washes over her as she thinks of the Duke. She inwardly apologizes to him, confessing that she knew about his pain but had chosen to look the other way. After a moment, a calm resolve settles in. She reassures herself that she doesn't have to be the one to save him. All he has to do is wait a little longer, and the story's true heroine will appear to fulfill her role. Later, Marin approaches Duke Gerald, who is waiting for her. She hesitantly asks if they can skip their session for the day, admitting she isn't confident enough yet. However, Gerald is firm. He reminds her of her promise, a playful smirk on his face, as he beckons her to hurry over. Flustered, Marin suddenly extends her hand as if offering a paw shake. Gerald is confused, clarifying he asked for a wrist check. He then mercilessly teases her, asking if she wants to become his pet dog, leaving Marin completely red-faced. Flustered, Marin pulls her hand back as Duke Gerald holds her wrist, amused that she's still so thin. She defensively insists she's been eating well and will gain weight soon. Quickly changing the subject, she presents a book she brought to read to him. Marin explains that it's a fairy tale, thinking it will help him sleep. Gerald dryly calls fairy tales the worst, especially those with happy endings. However, he concedes that its boring nature should work perfectly. Taking this as an odd compliment, Marin opens the book and begins reading The Grateful Crow. As Marin reads the fairy tale, Duke Gerald listens intently. Her small, clear voice cuts through the darkness of his world, just as it did the day before. The sound triggers a disjointed memory, and he sees himself at a desk, uttering an apology. Suddenly, he recalls Marin's voice also saying, "I'm sorry." The memory confuses him deeply. Floating in his own dark thoughts, he questions what she could possibly be apologizing for. His mind races, wondering if she was lying about her identity all along. As Duke Gerald's consciousness begins to slip away, he desperately fights to stay awake. His internal struggle startles Marin, who looks up from her book in confusion. Before she can react, the Duke lunges forward, grabbing her and pulling her into a sudden, tight embrace. A completely flustered Marin can only stammer his title as he buries his face in her shoulder. His mind races with suspicion, wondering if she used some kind of poison. He can't understand why he's falling asleep so easily, especially with the strange scent coming from her. As Duke Gerald held her, he was overwhelmed by her scent, a clean mix of grass and sunshine. He quickly dismissed his earlier suspicion of poison. Releasing her, he left a flustered Marin demanding to know what was going on. The Duke admitted that his drowsiness had faded and that her reading alone had helped him rest. Delighted by her success, Marin enthusiastically offered to continue. However, the Duke cut her short, telling her it was enough. Confused by his mood swing, she asked if he disliked the book, offering to find another. Duke Gerald firmly rejects Marin's offer to continue. He reveals his true fear. Her presence is so calming that he's afraid he'll fall into a sleep too deep to ever wake from. With that unsettling admission, he dismisses her for the night. The next day, a weary Marin is working when Perito approaches. He tries to console her about the difficult task, telling her not to feel burdened. Marin explains that the Duke did doze off for a moment. This news sends Perito leaping from his chair in absolute shock, questioning if His Grace actually slept. Perito clasps Marin's hands, overjoyed by the news. He declares that what she accomplished is truly amazing, as no one else has ever succeeded. A bewildered Marin questions if she really did anything special. When he offers the 1 gold reward, she tries to refuse, explaining that the Duke only dozed off for a second. Perito firmly dismisses her modesty, insisting she has more than earned it. Reluctantly, Marin accepts the payment, feeling a bit guilty but determined to have another chance tomorrow. 1 week later, the situation has shifted once again. A week later, things took a strange turn. The Duke is now actively avoiding Marin, leaving her completely confused and frustrated. While she appreciates the free time to catch up on paperwork and reading, she knows the situation isn't right. Deciding to take matters into her own hands, she walks with purpose toward his chambers. Marin can't understand his aversion to rest. To her, sleep is a basic need, and she questions how someone with his fragile health can possibly survive without it. This just can't continue. Having reached her limit, Marin decides to say what's on her mind. She marches toward the Duke's chambers and loudly accuses him of simply being scared to sleep. After calling him a coward, she turns and walks away, leaving only the sound of her footsteps echoing down the empty hall. The bold move has its consequences. The next day, the mansion is eerily quiet. As Marin walks through the annex with her books, she can't help but feel a little anxious, wondering if he will ever call for her again. As Marin walks down the hall, she overhears a commotion. It's the young maid, Yuria, being cornered by a group of senior maids. They mock Yuria for calling Marin lady, sneering that they both have the same commoner status. Yuria tries to defend her, but the bullies cut her off. They viciously claim to know the truth, that Marin is just a woman who is sold to the mansion. Listening from the doorway, Marin's face hardens. She's heard enough. The senior maids continue their torment, cornering Yuria. They sneer, claiming to know the truth about Marin, whispering venomously that she was a woman from the city's shadowed districts and that her mother was the same. They mock Marin for acting like a noble. Yuria, trembling, shouts that it isn't true, defending Lady Rona's honor. Enraged at the defiance, one of the bullies raises a hand to discipline the young maid. But before the blow can land, a book comes flying through the air, aimed squarely at the aggressor's head. Marin steps into the hall, her expression like ice. She calmly asks the senior maid exactly who she thinks she's raising her hand against. As Marin calls a relieved Yuria to her side, the enraged bully tries to stop the younger girl by force. The senior maid, undeterred, scoffs that Marin only acts tough because she has the Duke's favor. Announcing it's lesson time, the bullies advance. Yuria bravely steps forward, telling Marin she will handle it, but Marin has reached her limit. Refusing to back down, she lifts the heavy book with a furious expression, yelling for the brats to get away. As the maids shriek, Yuria sees her chance and tackles the others. Marin, impressed by the perfect assist, proudly cheers on her friend's successful takedown of the bullies. But the fight isn't over. The senior maid, absolutely furious, easily overpowers Marin and pins her to the floor. She sneers that struggling is useless and tells her to stay still. Yuria cries out Marin's name and tries to intervene, but another maid forcefully shoves her away. The bullies loom over Marin, enjoying their victory. Suddenly, a sharp, authoritative voice demands to know the meaning of the commotion. It's the head maid. The triumphant smirks instantly vanish from the bullies' faces as they freeze in pure terror. Before the head maid can get answers, Butler Seabass arrives. Seeing Marin on the floor, he moves in a flash, effortlessly tossing the bullies aside. Marin is stunned by his strength as he tells her to get up. The head maid, stone-faced, demands an explanation from Yuria. Trembling but determined, Yuria reveals the true offense. The maids had insulted Marin and her mother's honor, calling them women of ill repute. Hearing this, the friendly butler's expression turns terrifyingly cold, and the head maid is speechless with fury. The head maid is absolutely enraged. She furiously tells the bullies they have dishonored the entire household by insulting the Duke's guests. Taking full responsibility for their behavior, she then offers Marin a sincere apology. Marin calmly states that while she might have overlooked personal insults, she cannot forgive them for speaking ill of her mother. She then delivers her own judgment, requesting the maids be reassigned to the garbage dump, where their careless words can't hurt anyone. As her final condition, she asks that they be managed closely to prevent them from ever bullying again. With a deep bow, the head maid assures Marin that such a thing will never happen again. Butler Seabass, seeing the situation is handled, suggests taking the shaken Marin to see the physician. Just then, a new voice cuts through the tension. It's Olive Leon, who has just arrived and is completely bewildered by the scene. Marin greets him, embarrassed that he saw the messy aftermath of the confrontation. Without asking for details, Olive tells her they must go. His Excellency, Duke Gerald, has personally summoned her. In Duke Gerald's study, he cuts straight to the point, asking what happened. His senses pick up the faint smell of blood, confirming a confrontation took place. Olive explains that some maids insulted Marin, leading to a fight. When Gerald presses for details, Olive reveals they called her the Duke's courtesan. The air grows cold as the Duke's fury becomes obvious. He gives a chilling order for Olive to permanently silence the maids for their insult. Marin quickly stops him, explaining she already punished them by reassigning them to the garbage dump. Gerald simply calls her merciful. Gerald cuts to the chase, asking if she won the confrontation. Marin panics, a memory of a past brawl flashing through her mind. Does he know about her history? She reluctantly admits that she didn't lose. A small smile plays on the Duke's lips as he comments that he's brought a Real fighter into his castle. He stands and walks toward her, sensing she's a mess despite his blindness. Warning her not to lie, he grabs her wrist, questioning what makes her so brave and calling her his temporary fiancée. Flustered by his touch, Marin stammers a quick apology. Olive notices her sleeve is torn from the fight and insists on calling a dressmaker for new clothes. True to her frugal nature, Marin says she can just mend it herself. But Gerald overrules her, telling his temporary fiancé there's no need to refuse. He then adds a strange condition: she shouldn't misunderstand the meaning of the gift. This cryptic comment leaves Marin completely baffled, wondering what hidden meaning his gesture could possibly have. With Olive dismissed, Marin is left alone with the Duke and a feeling of rising panic. Gerald quickly cuts through the awkward silence, reminding her she's supposed to be working and noting the book in her hands. Realizing he's right, she quickly asks if she should start reading to him now. A faint smile appears on Gerald's face as he confidently tells her to proceed, adding that he isn't a coward. This strange and unexpected remark only deepens Marin's confusion about her eccentric new employer. As Marin processes his strange remark, a horrifying possibility dawns on her. She remembers her past thoughts about him, specifically that he was scared of living. A wave of panic washes over her as she wonders if he somehow heard her. Did he know her secret? The Duke, however, just offers a confident smile. With an unnerving calm, he simply tells her to begin. The book she holds opens to a map of the Saran Desert, marking the start of her first reading session with her mysterious employer. The book details the harsh Saran Desert, a land teeming with countless monsters bordering the empire. For generations, it was the sole duty of the Duke of Vine's family to guard the border and stop these creatures. The story then shows a younger Duke Gerald in his military uniform after a long battle. Believing the fight is won, he's ready to return home. However, his advance is halted because none of his scouts have come back. He asks a nearby soldier if there's any news, just as another man in armor approaches with a report. The soldier reports that he has discovered the cause of the scouts' disappearance. However, he seems hesitant to explain with words, insisting that it is something the Duke must witness for himself. The memory then shifts to a deceptively beautiful, vibrant forest. The lost scouts are shown venturing deeper, where a strange, ethereal figure appears to lure one of them forward. But the enchanting sight was a deadly trap. A monstrous, carnivorous plant erupts from the earth, its terrifying maw wide open, and lunges at the unsuspecting soldier, sealing his fate instantly. The reporting soldier confirms he found the source of the danger and returned immediately, just as he was ordered. As Duke Gerald listens, a strangely sweet scent fills the air, and he instantly understands the monster's tactic. Realizing it lures its victims with smell, he commands his men to cover their noses and fall back. His subordinate protests, worried about him facing the threat alone. But Gerald explains that he is the only one who can fight here. With a calm promise to return soon, he ventures into the dangerous forest alone. Inside the dangerous forest, Duke Gerald moves carefully through the thorny vines. He quickly figures out the monster's structure, realizing the outer plants are just decoys protecting a central host. His blindness gives him an edge, allowing him to focus on locating the true source of the threat. After a brief search, he pinpoints the core, a massive, blooming flower hidden deep within the thicket. Without hesitation, Gerald lunges forward, driving his sword straight into the ground. A shockwave of power ripples out, and the monstrous vines instantly begin to crumble into dust. With the monstrous plant defeated, Duke Gerald is suddenly thrown into a painful memory. He recalls a blinding flash of intense light, the very moment that plunged his world into permanent darkness. But this memory gives way to a rare, peaceful dream, where a gentle voice wishes him well. He wakes up in his study, feeling surprisingly rested. He asks his cloaked aide how long he was out, learning it was only an hour. For the first time in a long while, Gerald feels truly revitalized by his sleep. While Duke Gerald felt refreshed, his thoughts turned to Marin. He considered her a dangerous woman, someone who could either free him from his suffering or trap him in it forever. He was deeply conflicted about how to proceed with her. Elsewhere, Marin was a nervous wreck, finally grasping why Lady Olive had been so surprised earlier. Her spiraling thoughts were interrupted by a knock. The maid, Yuria, entered, concerned for Marin's well-being. Marin put on a brave face, assuring Yuria that she was completely fine and hadn't been scolded. Marin takes Yuria's hands, firmly telling her to never dismiss her feelings again. She promises that if anyone ever causes trouble, Marin will be there to fight with her. Yuria is deeply moved, thanking her for the support. Marin explains that while she was bothered by the maid's behavior, she couldn't tolerate them insulting her mother. Feeling a new bond, Yuria asks Marin to speak to her informally. After some adorable begging from the maid, Marin agrees. Delighted by this, Yuria happily offers to comb Marin's hair and even mend her dress. As they bonded, Marin mentioned her lack of clothes, which led her to ask a curious question: what does it mean when someone gifts you clothes? Yuria, surprised, asked who gave her such a present, but Marin quickly brushed it off. Yuria then explained the tradition. In the West, a gift of clothing is a serious gesture, usually reserved for lovers. It carries a very intense and direct meaning. I want to possess you. This startling revelation left Marin completely flustered, her face flushing red as she processed the Duke's hidden intentions. Following instructions from another staff member, Yuria and Marin head to the reception room. Inside, a beautifully dressed woman with bright golden hair greets them with a cheerful hello. Confused by the unexpected visitor, Yuria asks who she is. The woman flashes a brilliant smile and introduces herself as Eider Smill, a designer from the famous Gloria dress shop. She then announces she's been hired to make dresses for both of them. Marin is stunned, realizing Eiders is the original female lead's exclusive designer. Composing herself, Marin politely gives her name. Suddenly, another woman arrives, introducing herself as Rona. Marin is completely flustered, realizing it's her own mother. Overwhelmed, she asks the designer, Eiders, if her mother is getting a dress as well. Eiders confirms that Duke Gerald commissioned outfits for both of them. This news stops Marin in her tracks. She had assumed the gift was only for her. The Duke's surprising consideration for her family reveals a caring side she never knew he had. Playing it cool, Marin quickly explains to her mother that the dress is simply a reward for helping him. Marin's mother, Rona, is absolutely overjoyed. Beaming with excitement, She exclaims how grateful she is that the Duke looked out for her as well. With a happy surprise settled, the designer Iders gets down to business. She cheerfully pulls out a measuring tape, announcing that it's time to start the fittings. The group moves to a different room where Iders begins taking Marin's measurements. As the designer works, Marin stands stiffly, her expression thoughtful as she processes the day's unexpected events. As the fitting continues, the designer Iders studies Marin with a sharp eye. She initially mistook Marin for a commoner, but now realizes she must be a noble lady. Thinking back to the Duke's outrageous order for hundreds of dresses, a sudden idea dawns on her. A sly smile appears as she speculates that this might secretly be for a wedding. Realizing this is a golden opportunity to save her failing shop, Iders is filled with fiery ambition. With renewed energy, her team swarms a completely bewildered Marin, taking measurements with intense focus. With the measurements complete, Iders eagerly presents the design catalog. For Marin's mother, Rona, she recommends a luxurious purple winter dress with a high, wool neckline. Turning to Marin, the designer suggests a delicate, light blue pastel gown, certain the color will suit her perfectly. Rona is amazed by the new styles, declaring every single one is beautiful. Marin, however, has a practical request. She needs a dress that's easy to move in. Iders simply beams, assuring her that she can get both beautiful and functional dresses. Marin explains she only needs one comfortable dress, suggesting Iders recommend a second one for her mother instead. The designer is stunned. Realizing this is exactly what the Duke predicted. She reveals his outrageous backup plan. If they were too modest and only chose one outfit, he would purchase her shop's entire collection. Faced with the threat of bankrupting him with kindness, a flustered Marin and her mother are left speechless. To avert this financial disaster, Marin immediately backtracks, announcing she'll take another look at the catalog after all. Later, Marin lets out a troubled sigh, feeling overwhelmed. The Duke has given her a home, food, and now a pile of expensive dresses, but she feels she's done nothing to earn it. All she can offer him in return, she thinks, is reading fairy tales. Her quiet moment is interrupted by Zero, who approaches holding a book. Noticing her sad expression, the young boy asks why she looks so down. He heard she spent the day buying dresses and thought she would be in a good mood. Marin explains her unease to Zero, admitting it bothers her to receive so much kindness from the Duke without being able to repay him. He's doing far too much for her, and she feels indebted. Zero casually brushes off her worries, revealing a shocking truth. The Duke likely has more money than the Emperor. He explains that House Vines holds the exclusive rights to the entire desert trade, granting them immense wealth. Hearing that the Duke controls all of it, a stunned Marin can only stand in silence, processing the sheer scale of his fortune. Even with this new information, Marin can't shake her guilt. She feels the Duke's generosity is excessive and becomes determined to repay him. Turning to Zero, she asks a peculiar question about the effects of Mandelsong poison. After some back and forth, she asks if there's a cure for the stomachache it causes. Zero reminds her he isn't a doctor, but after Marin flatters him, his pride swells. He confirms there is a medicine to treat the pain, though not a detoxifier, and asks if she still wants it. Marin's eyes light up with hope. Marin enthusiastically agrees, and a delighted Zero promises to bring her the medicine right away. After thanking him, Marin stands in the library, a new resolve settling over her. She decides to help the Duke, at least until the original female lead of the story arrives. To truly understand the effects of the Mandelsong poison and how to counter them, she comes to a drastic and dangerous conclusion. With unwavering determination in her eyes, she decides she is going to try eating it herself. Out on the ducal estate lawn, Marin begins her risky experiment, searching for the Mandelsong flowers. She finds a patch with bigger blooms and quickly gathers them, planning to extract the juice later. As the sun sets, she realizes she's late to see the Duke. With no time to waste on preparations, she gets it together and decides on a more direct approach. Foregoing the juice, she simply pops one of the raw, poisonous flowers into her mouth, ready to face the consequences for the sake of her research. A mysterious voice confirms someone's eyes are closed and says it will now begin. The scene flashes back to a young woman who needed help finding a man named Perito. She sought out her father's retainers, but they all turned her away. Some made excuses to avoid her, while others were nowhere to be found. Back in the present, she looks pale and distressed. Her uncle sees her and immediately offers to call a doctor. She quickly explains that the retainers refuse to meet her and that no one seems to be searching for Perito. Panicked, she pleads for his help. Kylon coolly asks his niece why she is the only one making a scene while everyone else stays put. He questions if she really doesn't understand why the retainers are avoiding her and why no one is searching for Perito. He then delivers a chilling message, telling her that if she wants to see Perito, she should just stay quiet until the funeral. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a panicked Martin Motiger, whose stomach churns violently. A memory surfaces of his mother happily telling him he would soon have a new father, a thought that makes him feel utterly doomed. Duke Gerald sits in his chair, remarking that the fairy tale book Marin is reading has some odd content. Flustered, Marin insists it's just a normal story, but her voice trembles. As she internally panics, hoping he won't catch on, she suddenly doubles over, clutching her stomach in a desperate attempt to create a distraction. Unfazed, the Duke simply tells her she should go. The moment she rushes out of the room, a smirk plays on Gerald's lips before he breaks into a hearty laugh, clearly amused by her terrible acting. Alone, Duke Gerald reflects on the women he's met. They all tried so hard to be elegant, but Marin is the first to sprint from a room like that. He correctly guesses she'll be too embarrassed to face him tomorrow. As he sits, a pleasant floral scent makes him wonder if flowers always smelled this nice. Meanwhile, Marin is in her room, consumed by embarrassment. Convinced he laughed at her awful acting, she buries her face in her pillow and flails around, wailing about how she will ever see him again. Still reeling from her encounter, Marin hides in her room, cursing the Duke for her intense embarrassment. A knock at the door reveals the maid, Yuria, who asks how she's feeling. Confused, Marin learns that the Duke's aide, Olive, sent Yuria with stomach medicine to look after her. The news that even Olive knows about her terrible acting sends Marin into another spiral of shame. She dramatically collapses onto the bed, convinced she's dying of humiliation. When Yuria spots some herbs in a basket, a distraught Marin just tells her to take them all. A moment later, Marin finds herself lying in bed with a strange green paste on her forehead. Yuria explains that it's a remedy made from the Mandelsong herbs, something she learned as a child to help with fevers. She mentions she used to do this for her twin brother, now an apprentice knight at the castle. As Marin feels the poultice working, she thanks the maid for her kindness. Suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes her. She sits bolt upright in bed, realizing she's just found a solution to her problems. With her epiphany, Marin suddenly sits up, startling the maid beside her. She recalls that the Mandelsong herbs are listed as poisonous and can't be fed to the Duke. But what if they were applied externally instead? She realizes it's a long shot, but if there's any chance it could ease his pain, she has to try. Marin excitedly thanks a very confused Yuria for the idea. Yuria, watching the goop-covered lady, begins to worry about her condition. The next evening, Marin enters the Duke's chambers with her prepared remedy and greets him. Duke Gerald sits at his desk and acknowledges Marin's presence, noticing her flustered state. He asks if something happened the day before, but Marin quickly denies it. Clearing her throat, she announces she has a request before they start reading. Unimpressed, the Duke asks why he should grant it. Marin insists it's for his own benefit and then explains she needs to touch him. The mood instantly sours. The Duke cuts her off, his voice low and dangerous, as he orders her to repeat herself. Marin nervously complies. Suddenly worried, she's crossed a major line. Realizing how badly she's worded her request, Marin panics. She tries to explain that he's completely misunderstood her intentions, but Duke Gerald suddenly closes the distance between them. Leaning in close, he smirks and asks if she's announcing her plan to pounce on him. Completely flustered by his proximity and provocative question, Marin is left speechless. Her face turns bright red as the Duke holds his amused expression, clearly enjoying how easily he turned the tables and backed her into a corner with his teasing. The Duke coolly reminds her of her own words. She was the one who said she needed to touch him. Not letting her off the hook, he leans back with a smirk and asks precisely where she was planning to initiate contact. Completely flustered, Marin blurts out, "Everywhere," before frantically correcting herself. She insists it won't be her doing the touching, but something else. Her strange and jumbled explanation only seems to amuse the Duke more, leaving him to wonder what on earth she's plotting with this very confusing request. Duke Gerald continues his teasing, sarcastically guessing if she plans to use a knife on him like a spy would. Annoyed that he's making fun of her, Marin quickly clarifies her real intentions. It's not a weapon, but a poultice made from crushed flowers to help with his headaches. The Duke initially dismisses her, claiming he feels fine. Unwilling to give up, Marin pleads for him to just try it once. After a moment of silence, he finally relents. Overjoyed by his permission, Marin beams and thanks him profusely, happy he's accepted her help. With the poultice ready, Marin excuses herself and approaches the Duke. As she gently touches his face, she fights the urge to remove his blindfold, knowing it would upset him. He immediately questions her, asking why she's putting it on his eyes instead of his forehead. Marin explains it's a folk remedy for headaches. The Duke pushes back, sarcastically wondering if it works on people who feel fine. Annoyed, Marin tells him to stay still unless he's scared of her. When he accuses her of pressing too hard, she simply plays innocent. Marin steps back, announcing she's finished applying the poultice. Looking at the Duke, she finds herself thinking he's still ridiculously handsome, even with herbs over his eyes. His voice suddenly cuts through her thoughts, asking when she plans to start reading. Startled, Marin realizes she was just staring at his face. Composing herself, she picks up a book and informs him that she will begin now. In the quiet, candlelit room, her voice fills the air as she starts to read aloud to him. Marin reflects on her reading sessions. She's noticed the Duke always wakes up the moment the story ends, which is why she seeks out longer books. After reading the final sentence, she hopes he has finally fallen into a deep sleep. She gently reaches over to remove the herbal poultice from his eyes. Suddenly, his hand shoots out and grabs her wrist, startling her. No longer wearing the poultice, the Duke's voice is low and serious as he demands to know what she made it from. Still holding her wrist, the Duke listens as Marin explains the poultice is made from a weed in his garden. He recalls she ate one the previous day, surprising her. The Duke states plainly that the scent is the same, causing Marin to marvel at his sharp sense of smell. He then presses her, asking for the name of this particular weed. After a brief pause, Marin reveals that its name is mandelsong, a herb with special properties she seems hesitant to discuss further. Duke Gerald reflects on the constant agony he's endured since losing his sight. His eyes are so sensitive that even the slightest stimulus causes them to throb, forcing him to wear a blindfold for protection. But today was different. For the first time, there was no stinging sensation. The mandelsong poultice Marin made slowly soaked through the band over his eyes, bringing a strange and welcome relief instead of pain. As he puzzles over this new comfort, a knock echoes from his office door. Without turning, he simply tells them to come in. The door opens to reveal two men, Olive and a very annoyed alchemist named Zero. Still in his pajamas with a sleep mask on his head, Zero demands to know why he's being summoned at such a late hour. Olive quickly tries to quiet him, reminding him that Duke Gerald is blind, not deaf. Ignoring this, Zero complains that being dragged out of bed is the real problem. Olive cuts through the bickering to reveal the truth. Zero has been working nonstop for 3 nights on a medicine to cure the Duke's eyes, a secret Zero desperately tries to silence. With his secret out, Zero frantically tries to silence Olive, who explains that the alchemist's foul mood is due to his sleepless nights working for the Duke. From his chair, a small smirk plays on Duke Gerald's lips as he remarks on such devotion. Impatient, Zero demands the Duke ask his questions quickly so he can go back to bed. Gerald nonchalantly mentions that many people have recently been curious about that weed. Realizing the Duke is referring to Marin, Zero cuts to the heart of the matter, directly asking Gerald why he is so interested in her. Instead of answering, Zero deflects with a challenging smirk, asking the Duke to simply give Marin to him if he's so unconcerned. He quickly chastises Gerald, stating that Marin isn't an object to be passed around. The alchemist finds it particularly ironic coming from a man who refuses to even use her proper name. Unfazed by the lecture, Duke Gerald leans back with an unnervingly confident smile. With absolute certainty, he states that the woman they're discussing is already his. The possessive claim hangs in the air, leaving Zero speechless. A cheerful girl with braided hair playfully calls a little boy a squirt. Annoyed, the boy immediately protests the nickname. She continues to tease him about his height, which only makes him angrier. She then offers him candy, but he isn't having it. Fed up, The boy puffs out his cheeks and declares he's done playing with his sister for the day. With a mischievous grin, she warns him he'll regret that decision. She then reveals her trump card, a huge stick of cotton candy. The boy's anger instantly melts away, replaced by pure awe. The young boy marvels at the cotton candy, asking if it's a cloud. His older sister playfully agrees, boasting she could grab the stars for him if he wanted. With a bright smile, she makes him promise to always play with her, and he happily accepts. This sweet memory quickly sours. The narrator reveals that the day to keep that promise never came. A flashback shows the devastating moment their bloodline's secret awakened too soon. Overwhelmed by excruciating pain in his head and ears, the young boy could only cry, not understanding the chaotic sensory overload. A distraught Monica pleaded to comfort her brother, but an older woman held her back, insisting they couldn't interfere. Monica couldn't understand why they had to watch the 5-year-old boy suffer while their father stood by silently. After that day, Gerald was isolated in a tower. His father explained the secret of their bloodline, forcing the boy into endless training to control his overwhelming senses. The loneliness stripped him of his cheerful personality, turning the once happy child into someone completely devoid of emotion as the years went by. Suddenly, a familiar voice cuts through Gerald's lonely existence. From the window of his tower, he can hear his sister, Monica, calling from the grounds below. She confidently announces she knows he can hear everything, dismissing the family secret as nonsense she figured out long ago. But this is no happy reunion. Monica's voice is laced with sadness as she reveals their father is marrying her off. She laments his cruelty, heartbroken that he won't even let her say goodbye to her little brother before she's sent away forever. Monica continued her farewell, trying to sound cheerful for her little brother. She told him she was getting married to a kind and handsome man. Promising to live well, she asked him to visit her in the south whenever he was finally free. Inside the lonely tower, young Gerald's hand tightened into a fist. Monica's facade then crumbled as tears fell. She wondered aloud how tall he had grown, her voice breaking as she apologized for not even being able to hold him goodbye. Suddenly, the entire memory shatters like broken glass. A small bundle lands at Monica's feet. It's a rock wrapped in a cloth, a farewell message from her brother. Reading his words, a fond smile breaks through her tears as she calls him a little squirt. From his lonely tower window, young Gerald watches her go, silently wishing her happiness and a good life. The memory fades, pulling us back to the present. The adult Duke Gerald now stands outside the mansion as his aide, Olive Leon, approaches respectfully. He addresses the Duke formally and offers him his cane. Olive explains that the new cane is a gift from Sir Zero. As Gerald takes it, he feels its unique design and suspects it's more than just a walking stick, possibly hiding a blade. Approving of the work, he tells Olive to pass along his praise. Just as they reach the carriage, Marin rushes out, calling his name. She insists on coming with him, reminding the Duke that he struggles with carriage travel and asking if he'll be all right alone. He simply addresses her as Temp as she catches her breath before him. Marin insists she'll be fine with the difficult journey ahead, but the Duke advises her not to overdo it. She presses on, worried that he has barely slept, and offers to read to him during the ride. Gerald cuts her off, simply calling her Temp and promising he will return soon. Seeing she can't change his mind, Marin hands him a box instead, explaining it's a poultice. He calmly accepts her gift and departs in his carriage, leaving Marin to watch with a worried expression as the vehicle disappears from view. As Marin watches him leave, she's overwhelmed with fear, silently pleading that no one gets hurt. She voices one last request, asking him to please come back safely. In that moment, a voice enters her mind. It's Gerald. He reassures her that they will be careful and will return. Startled but relieved by the connection, Marin whispers her agreement. The carriage rolls away, leaving her behind. Elsewhere, however, the news of his arrival is met with shock. An unknown person clenches their fist, furious that the Duke is on his way. A blonde man slammed his fist on the table, frustrated that he had warned the Duke not to come given his condition. A red-haired woman tried to calm him, but he fretted that it was too late since Gerald was already en route. Her expression turned cold and calculating. She suggested that if he was coming, they would simply have to prepare a grand welcome for him. Her sinister smile made it clear this reception would be anything but friendly, promising a dangerous confrontation ahead for the Duke. The story flashes back 2 weeks to what seemed like a normal day. A young boy named Perito excitedly tells his older sister, Dia, that their parents are taking him to pick out a birthday present. As his parents call from the waiting carriage, Dia playfully tells him to be good and come back safely. He gives her a bright smile and agrees, promising to see her later. Tragically, this tender moment was their last. Dia recalls with sorrow that it was the final time she ever saw her little brother or their parents again. Dia recounts the terrible aftermath of the carriage incident. Her parents were eventually found, but her little brother Perito was gone without a trace. Desperate for help, she sought out her father's most trusted allies, but they either ignored her or had vanished completely. In the present, she pleads with her uncle, Kylon. He notes how pale she is, but she explains her desperation. No one is helping her find Perito. Instead of offering comfort, Kylon coldly asks why she's making a fuss when everyone else has decided to stay quiet. Her uncle's expression darkens as he asks if she really doesn't understand why no one is helping. He delivers a chilling threat. If she ever wants to see Perito again, she must stay silent until the funeral. The horrifying implication hits Dia, and she screams, accusing him of hiding her brother. In response, Kylon's hand flashes out, and a sharp sound echoes as he strikes her. He commands her to watch her tongue and go to her room. With a twisted smile, he adds that if she behaves, he might bring Perito to her. A painful memory surfaces of a woman pleading to see her daughter. A man's voice promises to allow it, but only if she does exactly as he says and causes no trouble. The scene shifts to another memory, where a young girl tearfully tells a woman named Monica that she misses her mom. Finally, we see a young Dia asking her own mother why her uncle never visits them. Her mother gently explains that their family has many enemies and he is busy protecting them all, hiding the true nature of his cold and controlling behavior. A memory flashes through Dia's mind of her mother's confident promise. She had once declared that the Grand Ducal House would always protect them. But as a child, Dia couldn't believe it, wondering why the Duke never answered her letters. In the present, Duke Gerald stands consumed by a quiet rage. He wants to deal with Kylon immediately, but knows he must wait for the right moment. He has someone tracking Kylon's every move. Just then, his butler enters with urgent news. Kylon has suddenly moved the funeral to the very next day. The butler continues, explaining Kylon didn't even notify the southern nobles. He then delivers the most disturbing news. The Earl and Countess's remains were cremated immediately, supposedly due to their terrible condition. This is the last straw for Duke Gerald. His entire body trembles with rage as he realizes the depth of Kylon's deception. He questions how Kylon dares to defile his family, even in their final moments. Meanwhile, at the Vines ducal castle, a lone voice expresses complete shock at the sight of the magnificent estate. Back at the mansion, Marin stares at a map in disbelief. She realizes Duke Gerald somehow completed a 10-day journey in just 1 week. A flood of worries overwhelms her as she thinks about his well-being. She frets over whether he's eating, if his poultice has run out, and how he's coping with his inability to sleep. Lost in regret for not going with him, she's suddenly pulled from her thoughts. A calm voice asks why she looks so serious. Startled, Marin turns to find the white-haired man, Zero, standing behind her chair. Startled, Marin is surprised to find not Zero, but a man who looks exactly like an older version of him. He introduces himself as Jeromian Rodel Sante, Zero's brother. The name Sante immediately registers with Marin, and she connects him to the powerful Northern Ducal House. This development wasn't in the original story, causing her to panic internally. When Jeromian catches her staring, she quickly explains it's just because of his striking resemblance to his brother. After introducing herself, she reaffirms that seeing him feels like looking at a future, grown-up Zero. Jeromian confidently states this is great news for Zero, as his brother will one day be as handsome as him. Playing along, Marin showers him with praise, calling him dazzling and graceful. Her genuine compliment catches him off guard, and he gets flustered before steering the conversation back to his original question about why she looked so worried. Marin's mood shifts as she admits she was thinking about Duke Gerald. She confesses that she can't get him out of her head. Jeromian observes that she must care about the Duke a lot, a comment that stops Marin in her tracks. Jeromian finds Marin's flustered state amusing, noting that things are getting very interesting. Internally, Maren admits he's right. She does care. She tries to rationalize her feelings, reminding herself that Duke Gerald is the novel's powerful male lead. He's destined to overcome every trial and reach a happy ending on his own. Logically, he's the last person she should be worried about in a single trip. As she stands with a gentle horse, it nuzzles her cheek in a comforting gesture. Maren smiles, touched by what feels like an attempt to cheer her up. Her moment is cut short when she sees Butler Seabass approaching. He expresses surprise at finding her there and asks what brought her to the stables. Maren explains she just needed a quiet place to think. Butler Seabass confides that he often comes to the stables to sort through his thoughts, a habit from his days as a knight. Maren senses a sadness in his expression. The conversation shifts to the beautiful horse she's with, and Seabass proudly mentions he gives it special care. Maren compliments its glossy, healthy coat. With a wistful tone, Seabass reveals the horse once belonged to Countess Adrian. He fondly remembers how much she loved to ride, a detail that catches Maren completely by surprise and adds another piece to the mansion's puzzle. Butler Seabass continues his story, fondly recalling how the late Countess Adrian used to pester him for swordsmanship lessons. He explains he was always too busy with his duties as vice-captain of the Knights to teach her often. Maren observes that the Countess must have been quite energetic, and Seabass agrees she was a truly lively woman. Seeing his wistful expression, Maren tries to leave him to his memories. Seabass, however, turns the concern back on her, offering to listen. Maren admits she was just wishing she were a better rider, so she could have accompanied the Duke. Butler Seabass makes Maren a surprising offer. He could teach her how to ride. Maren is thrilled by the idea, but immediately worries about imposing on his time. The butler insists it's no trouble. He explains that he regrets not teaching the late Countess more and doesn't want to make that same mistake again. He then suggests she also learn swordsmanship for self-defense. When Seabass points out that her new skills could one day help the Duke, Maren's mind is made up. With renewed determination, she eagerly asks him to teach her both. Maren eagerly promises Butler Seabass she will work hard, so he won't regret his decision to teach her. Seabass responds with a warm, approving smile. Later, the scene shifts to a lavish dinner party. A young woman named Olive Leon sits at the table, thinking the fancy meal is inappropriate during a mourning period. Still, she's grateful it will feed her younger siblings. As Duke Gerald makes his entrance, everyone stands to welcome him. However, a blond man named Martin Motiger jumps up from his chair, his expression filled with clear annoyance at the Duke's arrival. Despite Martin Motiger's clear annoyance, another man, Kylon Adrian, quickly intervenes. He warmly pulls out a chair for Duke Gerald, inviting him to be seated. As the Duke approaches, one of the young ladies notices his striking resemblance to his late mother. Kylon then prompts his daughters to introduce themselves to their esteemed guest. The eldest, Dia Adrian, offers her greetings first. She is followed by the second daughter, Garnet, and finally the youngest, a girl named Rubiana. The introductions are formal, but the tension from Martin Motiger remains. As the Duke takes his seat, Kylon Adrian announces he's arranged a special meal. He adds a sharp jab, hoping the Duke can enjoy it through taste, since he can't see it. The Duke remains silent, but his aide declares that his master has no appetite. This triggers a smug internal thought from Martin Motiger, who scoffs at the Duke's pride despite his condition. As the meal begins, the Duke, who hasn't eaten a bite, suddenly addresses the Adrian sisters, pointing out they haven't finished their food, leaving them startled. Duke Gerald's aide calmly addresses the Adrian sisters. He notes they seem finished with their meal and suggests they retire for refreshments, leaving the men to talk privately. The maids immediately escort the bewildered girls from the room, leaving Kylon shocked and speechless. Martin Motiger, however, flies into a rage. He jumps to his feet, demanding to know why the Duke is dismissing his nieces. As he insists that even a Duke can't act so rudely, a sword suddenly slices through the air, stopping just inches from his face. The blade nicks Martin Motiger's cheek, drawing a bit of blood. Duke Gerald simply tells him he's being noisy. Stunned, Martin Motiger sputters that the Duke can't attack another noble without cause, reminding him of imperial law. As he panics, the Duke's aide calmly approaches. The aide, Olive Leon, points out the bleeding and offers a handkerchief, advising him to apply pressure. Martin Motiger furiously snatches the cloth from his hand. Across the table, a subtle, Satisfied smirk forms on the Duke's face as he listens to the commotion. Duke Gerald calmly points out that Martin Motiger has accepted the handkerchief. Utterly bewildered, Martin Motiger can only stare in shocked silence. The Duke then explains the implication of his actions. Since the handkerchief was taken, he declares it's now a duel. With a swift, fluid motion, he unsheathes the blade hidden within his walking cane. He stands ready to fight, leveling the sword at the stunned noble. Martin Motiger freezes, realizing he's been trapped in a challenge he never saw coming. With his cane sword drawn, Duke Gerald formally announces that this is now a duel. The declaration shocks the onlookers, especially Dia Adrian, who can't believe what she's seeing. Determined to witness the outcome, she decides to stay. She instructs her sister Garnet to take their youngest sibling to safety, promising to fill her in later. The Duke's aide, Olive Leon, gently tries to escort Dia away, warning that the scene will not be pleasant. Unmoved, Dia refuses to leave, insisting that she can handle it. Martin Motiger completely loses his composure, shouting that the whole thing is a setup and doesn't count. In his distress, the handkerchief slips from his hand and flutters to the floor. He then spots Dia Adrian, who has remained in the room. A flicker of desperate hope appears in his eyes as he turns to her, pleading for her support. He insists that she saw the entire exchange and can confirm that he never actually agreed to fight, clearly searching for any excuse to escape the Duke's challenge.
Dia Adrian fez Martin Motiger no escape.
She confirms she saw him accept the handkerchief and heard Duke Gerald acknowledge the challenge, making the duel official. Stunned by her betrayal, Martin Motiger is left speechless. Before he can recover, the Duke moves with blinding speed. The duel is over in a single, fluid motion. Martin Motiger finds himself on his knees, the cold steel of the Duke's cane sword pressed against him. Gerald coolly tells him he shouldn't have dropped his guard. Completely terrified, Martin Motiger begs for his life, admitting he's no match for him. Duke Gerald looks down at the defeated noble, noting that Martin Motiger knew the consequences and still dared to act. He calls him a worm for trying to harm his family. Panicked, Martin Motiger insists it was all a misunderstanding, desperately pleading for Dia to confirm his story. The Duke ignores him entirely. He turns to Dia and calmly asks for the location of someone named Farito. When she flinches, his composure breaks. He seizes her by the collar, his voice raw with fury as he demands she return his little brother immediately. Cornered, Dia turns her rage on her brother, Kylon. She yells that she doesn't care about his fate, only that he returns the Duke's brother, Farito. Terrified, Kylon stammers that he doesn't know where he is and was looking for him too. This confession pushes Dia over the edge. She reminds him he used this lie to lock them up and starve them. Losing all composure, she seizes Kylon by the collar, screaming threats as a horrified Martin Motiger begs her to stop. As the family imploded, Marin cried out for them to stop, but it was too late. In a desperate move, Kylon seized a maid, pressing a sharp letter opener to her throat. Unfazed by the hostage situation, Duke Gerald calmly asked if Kylon was prepared for the consequences. Panicked, Kylon insisted he would do it, but the Duke's patience was gone. He repeated his command to stop, his voice low and final. Before anyone could react, he swung his cane with incredible speed, cutting the tense standoff short. The Duke's cane revealed a hidden blade, which he swung with blinding speed. The steel stopped just inches from Kylon's neck. Frozen in pure terror, Kylon let out a choked gasp before collapsing to the floor, the fight completely gone from him. The Duke stood over the fallen man, his expression unreadable. Marin watched in horror, briefly wondering if Kylon had been seriously harmed. She quickly dismissed the impossible thought, but the shock of the event sent her slumping to the ground, utterly overwhelmed by the sudden and decisive end to the confrontation. With the immediate threat handled, Martin Motiger announced Baron Kylon's grim fate. He would be made an example of before the southern nobles to show the price of threatening the ducal family. The Duke then made a solemn vow to Marin, promising that no one would ever harm her or her kin again. His words struck a deep chord within her, and she began to cry. Marin remembered her mother's saying that the vines protect. She now saw the Duke as her vine, her steadfast protector, just as her mother said he would be. A hooded figure reports to the Duke that the mastermind, a mysterious red-haired woman, has vanished without a trace. Duke Gerald realizes his quick action against Kylon may have forced the enemy's hand unexpectedly. Their meeting is cut short by a knock at the door, and Olive Leon enters with a young lady named Monica. She thanks the Duke for everything, but says they can now manage on their own. Instead of accepting her departure, the Duke makes a surprising declaration, insisting that he will be her guardian from now on. Monica is stunned by the Duke's insistence. Olive Leon explains that with the mastermind still at large, she needs protection from unknown dangers. Listening from a distance, Duke Gerald suddenly cuts in, changing the subject entirely. He urgently asks if there's a tower on the estate, any place high enough for a bird to perch. Confused, Olive mentions an old bell tower past the forest. Without giving a reason, the Duke strides past them, dismissing their questions and demanding they take him to the tower immediately, leaving both Monica and Olive baffled by his strange command. A letter from the past reveals a heartfelt message. A woman writes to someone she calls her little one, asking if they are well. She describes her new home as a warm, peaceful place, joking that she wishes a monster would appear so she could show off her swordsmanship to her husband. She found a tower that reminded her of them and, feeling nostalgic, filled it with their old childhood toys. She admits it was her way of creating a space where she could properly miss the person she cared for so deeply. The letter continues, painting a picture of a loving mother. She writes about her youngest son, Perito, who stumbled upon her secret playroom and was absolutely delighted. He was thrilled to have a special secret shared just with his mom. The woman hoped her son would grow up to be just like the person she was writing to. But this warm memory sharply contrasts with a grim scene. A small boy, looking just like a young Perito, sits alone in the dark. He thinks about how hungry he is, regretting that his hidden snacks and collected rainwater are almost gone. A tear streams down young Perito's face as he calls out for his mother in the dark, empty room. His mind drifts back to her last instructions. She had told him that if she didn't return by the time he counted to 500, he was to hide in the secret room. Despite his tears, she promised she would shake off the bad men and come back for him. Her final, desperate command was clear. If she was too late, he must wait for his uncle, Duke Gerald, to find and protect him. Duke Gerald and his companions finally reach the secret room. He tries the handle, but the door is locked tight. The Duke is acutely aware of the terrified child hiding on the other side. He can almost hear the boy's frantic heartbeat and knows that any loud noise would only worsen his fear. Confused about why she was suddenly tasked to lead them here, the maid Yuria watches anxiously. The Duke turns to his aide, Olive, and asks how they can possibly open the door without startling the child inside. A young woman with dark hair is stunned, asking if Perito is really inside. Before anyone can respond, she rushes to the door and begins pounding on it with her fists. She desperately calls out her brother's name, telling him his sister is here and begging for just a single word. Duke Gerald stands back, watching the scene unfold. Her frantic shouts are met with an unnerving silence from the other side. Her energy finally fades, and she slumps against the door, telling the Duke that she believes he isn't there after all. Adrian loses hope, certain her brother would have answered if he were inside. Turning to Duke Gerald, she asks if he's positive the boy is in there. The Duke replies with unwavering confidence that Perito is definitely behind the door. He explains the child's silence is driven by fear, not absence. Perito likely thinks his family is being threatened. When his aide Olive doubts a 6-year-old could be so cautious, the Duke grimly suggests his mother must have warned him. Panicked, Olive asks if they should just break the door down. Olive gently tries to calm the distressed Dia, explaining that her brother is likely overwhelmed and needs time. Duke Gerald agrees that breaking the door down would only make things worse. He pauses for a moment, thinking deeply before approaching the door himself. With a clear and steady voice, he introduces himself as Gerald von Vines. He then makes a solemn promise to whoever is hiding inside. He will protect them. From the other side of the door, a small boy flinches, his attention captured by the Duke's powerful declaration. A tense silence hangs in the air before the lock finally clicks. The heavy door slowly creaks open, revealing a small, disheveled boy peering out from the darkness. It's Perito, looking scared but safe. Duke Gerald, sensing the boy's presence, calmly reaffirms his identity, stating he is Gerald von Vines. The name has an immediate effect on the child. Perito's eyes widen in shock and disbelief, and fresh tears well up as he stares at the famous Duke who promised to protect him, a flicker of hope replacing his fear. Duke Gerald calmly says the boy's name, Perito, and tells him it's time to go home. Overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion, Perito's legs buckle beneath him. His sister Dia cries out in panic as he collapses forward. Before the child can hit the floor, Gerald moves with surprising speed. He catches Perito firmly and lifts him into his arms. Holding the now unconscious boy securely against his chest, the Duke quietly apologizes, admitting he was late. For the first time, the boy is completely safe in the arms of his protector. Overcome with emotion, Dia watches as Duke Gerald holds her little brother. Tears of relief stream down her face as she whispers that they have finally found him. Still unconscious in the Duke's secure embrace, Perito weakly calls out for his sister. As Dia reaches for him, a vision of their late mother appears in a brilliant golden light, her expression peaceful and grateful. It's as if she is entrusting her children to Gerald's care, promising to watch over them. The Duke holds the boy closer, accepting the silent responsibility. In the training hall, Marin grips a large wooden sword, ready to begin her practice. Butler Seabass calmly approaches her, presenting a much smaller, stick-like blade. He informs her that this will be her training weapon for the day. A bit surprised, Marin asks if he made it himself. Seabass explains that since young children use swords like this to learn, he figured a full-sized one would be too much for her. Clearly insulted by the tiny weapon, Marin's training officially kicks off. A banner marks day, one of her swordsmanship journey. Marin's first few days of training are a total disaster. She overexerts herself with the sword and ends up bedridden with muscle pain. Feeling like a failure, she tells Seabass he must regret teaching her. However, the butler reassures her, saying her enthusiasm gives him energy and that hard work will pay off. Just as her motivation is restored, a servant rushes over to announce that Duke Gerald is arriving soon. The unexpected news catches both Marin and the head butler completely off guard, wondering why he's back already. Meanwhile, Duke Gerald handles business in his study. An aide confirms that the guardianship paperwork for the Earl's children is officially complete, with skilled knights assigned to protect them. However, a problem arises. The eldest daughter, Dia, has made a strange request to be isolated in the annex, allowing no visitors inside. The Duke grants her wish, but his aide is worried. With her debutante ball coming up, Dia's reclusive behavior will make it impossible for her to find a chaperone. The word chaperone seems to give the Duke an idea. Duke Gerald mulls over Dia Adrian's situation. Her debut can't be delayed without ruining her social standing, but the young lady is stubbornly refusing all potential chaperones. Suddenly, a solution clicks in his mind. If only he had a fiancée, she could sponsor Diameter. Pushing the thought aside, he instructs his aide to compile a list of candidates. After the aide leaves, Olive Leon peeks out from a nearby room. He's surprised to see Marin standing outside the Duke's study and wonders what brings her there at such a late hour. Olive Leon is stunned to find Marin outside the Duke's study. Before he can get a proper answer, she cheerfully peeks inside to greet Duke Gerald. Although the Duke corrects her timing, he allows her to enter. He immediately asks if something is wrong, sensing her unusual presence. Marin reassures him, explaining that she's simply concerned about his lack of sleep. She proudly presents a cart filled with remedies, from special poultices to soothing drinks, all meticulously prepared to help him finally get a peaceful night's rest. Marin cheerfully suggests they start with a glass of wine, but Duke Gerald just smirks. He compares her to an excited puppy waiting for its owner and playfully asks if she missed him that much. A flustered Marin quickly denies it, insisting she's only there to work and demanding he stop treating her like a pet. The Duke's playful tone then softens. He leans back and confesses that after being away for so long, hearing her voice is what finally makes it feel like he's home, leaving Marin momentarily speechless. Touched by his rare sincerity, Marin offers a warm, blushing smile and welcomes him home. Getting back to her duties, she announces she will apply the poultice and asks if he used the one she gave him earlier. Duke Gerald confirms that he did, then calmly begins to untie his blindfold. Surprised by this, Marin questions if it's all right for him to remove it. He reassures her that it's fine for a short while. Trusting his judgment, Marin agrees to apply the remedy directly to his eyes, moving closer to the now unguarded Duke. As Marin prepares the remedy, she realizes this is a rare moment of trust. He almost never removes his blindfold, making her wonder if the poultice is actually working. Filled with a quiet sense of relief, she smiles. Later, Her duties continue as she reads a story to him in his study. As her calm voice fills the room, the Duke reflects on his past. He remembers the suffocating grief after his sister's death, a coldness that froze him completely. But now, he admits that Marin's warm presence has begun to thaw that ice. As Marin reads a story in her soft voice, Duke Gerald feels a forgotten warmth returning to his cold world. The tale is about a disguised prince trying to reveal his true identity. But when he tells a knight who he is, the knight just laughs. When he tells a passing old man, the man calls him a liar and throws stones, forcing the prince to run. The story makes Gerald think about a life where the fake becomes real. A slow smile spreads across his face as an idea clicks into place. He's figured something out. The next morning, Duke Gerald wastes no time putting his new plan into motion. He calmly looks in Marin's direction and makes a completely unexpected proposal. He tells Lady Marin Spence that she should become engaged to him. The out-of-the-blue declaration leaves Marin utterly speechless. Her eyes widen in pure shock as she struggles to process his words, barely managing to ask him to repeat the absurd request. She is completely caught off guard by his sudden and bizarre proposition, wondering what could have possibly led him to this conclusion.